When we first press play, I want you to imagine the single most terrifying moment you can remember, a memory so vivid your chest tightens just recalling it. Maybe it was the instant the doctor paused a beat too long before speaking, or the night you thought the door handle was turning on its own. Notice how even right now your body cannot distinguish between memory and reality. Heart rate climbs, muscles coil, thoughts skip rope. Our first minute together is about exposing that flaw in our perception engine, because if fear can be summoned by a mere idea, then it is, at its core, an idea we can re-engineer. I'm inviting you to become co-designers with me. We will hack the code of dread. Why do we grant fear such authority over our lives? Evolution wired our ancestors to treat rustling grass as a lion. Until proven otherwise, survival favored the anxious. Yet here we are, scrolling in climate-controlled rooms, still running that Paleolithic software. We have safety locks, antibiotics, satellites mapping storms, but the firmware whispers, the world is hostile, stay small. I propose that we debug this ancestral program the same way we update phone apps, observe the crash reports, rewrite faulty loops, and push a patch. If we don't, we forfeit the grand adventure of existence to a reflex that no longer serves its original purpose.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's run a live thought experiment. Picture yourself standing at the threshold of a huge, dark cave. Evolution says, cave equals predator. Philosophy asks, what if the only beast inside is your unexamined self? Practical life advice. Before stepping in, breathe deep through the nose for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 6. That deliberate exhale signals the parasympathetic system, threat downgraded. Now ask, is the danger physical? Or is it the story I'm telling about potential danger? We just switched from reactive to reflective, from prey to protagonist. This is the first micro-victory in our war on unearned terror. Here is a brutally honest confession. I, too, feel fear filming every Beast level challenge you've seen. The difference is I've trained myself to translate that adrenaline spike into fuel. When we built an entire set over shark-infested waters, I wasn't fearless. I was faithful to the experiment. Faithful that if I leaned into the trembling, I'd uncover a message more valuable than comfort, the message that fear is data, not destiny. What if we measured our life not by how little we fear, but by how artfully we converse with it? Super deep question. When was the last time you interrogated your fear like a philosopher cross-examining a witness? Try asking it, what specifically are you protecting me from, and is that threat statistically or imaginatively real? 99% of the time it cannot answer with evidence. It responds with vague premonition, a rumor of catastrophe. In that silence, you gain leverage. And leverage turns mountains back into molehills. We are not erasing fear, we are renegotiating its contract. Let us borrow wisdom from the Stoics, who rehearsed poverty to vaccinate against it, and from Zen monks who sit facing a blank wall until the wall inside their mind crumbles. Technique, deliberate discomfort. Choose one controlled discomfort each day. Cold shower, speaking first in a meeting, walking a new neighborhood alone. The brain logs new data, survived, survived, survived. Neuroplasticity rewires your default prediction from danger to manageable. In 21 days, you won't be a daredevil. You'll simply possess a wider definition of ordinary life. Have you considered that the world itself is largely indifferent, a canvas awaiting the hues of our perception? When you label a city street unsafe, you edit out evidence of kindness happening on the same sidewalk. I once filmed a scene gifting strangers $10,000 each. We discovered that generosity, like fear, spreads contagiously. The identical environment mutated from suspicious to celebratory in minutes. So which version was real? The question exposes that reality has layers, and fear chooses the ugliest layer by default. What if we trained ourselves to zoom out and choose again? Here's a practical mental model: fear, uncertainty, X importance. If either variable drops, fear shrinks. Can we reduce uncertainty? Yes, research, rehearse, ask mentors. Can we lower apparent importance? Yes, remember that in the cosmic timeline of 13.8 billion years, your awkward presentation tomorrow is a microscopic blip. Zooming out turns dragons into paper origami. But we can also invert the formula and keep the importance high, using fear as a flashlight to point toward what matters most. Why does public speaking scare you? Because your idea matters. So follow the beam rather than flee it. Quick scene switch. A cat on a windowsill freezes, fur bristling. It stares at a space we deem empty. Your heartbeat accelerates. Did the cat detect an earthquake seconds before the seismograph, or is it spooked by dust? This ambiguity mirrors every email we hesitate to send and every love we hesitate to confess. We stand at the edge of possibility, reading animal signs, forgetting we are animals too, equipped with intuition. The lesson? Sometimes the warning is legitimate, other times it's a glitch. Our task is to verify the source, not surrender to the signal. Practical exercise: create a fear inventory journal. Column A, fears. Column B, probability of occurrence out of 100. Column C, cost of inaction if fear dictates. Review weekly. Patterns emerge: low probability, high cost stagnations. Seeing it on paper converts amorphous dread into solvable math. We trade panicked vagueness for spreadsheets. Fear hates spreadsheets. And now a philosophical swerve. What if fear is the universe's way of personalizing the unknown for each of us? Your unique constellation of anxieties forms a map of territories you have yet to explore. Where you tremble is where your next self awaits. Ask yourself right now, which part of the world feels off limits to me, and who could I become if I walked into that frontier? Imagine the biography you'd write after crossing it. Who would read it and feel less alone? I promise you this: once you realize fear is an instructor, not an invader, its lessons become priceless. The heartbreak you dreaded taught you empathy. The job loss you feared taught you creativity. The public failure you avoided taught you humility. Each scar rewrote your user manual. So here's an outrageous challenge, straight from the Emmer Beast playbook. Then write down the single scenario that scares you most in public, if you dare, and then design a safe but real way to taste a diluted version of it within the next 7 days. Film it, share it, tag us. Watch how many people cheer, because courage is another contagion. Before this segment ends, let's return to breath 4 in, 4 hold, 6 out, digitally synchronized across thousands of viewers. In that collective exhale, notice how your pulse slows even though nothing in your external environment changed. This is the ultimate mic drop. Your inner toolkit is sovereign. The world may rattle, markets may crash, relationships may wobble, but your breathing, your ability to pause, question, and reframe, travels with you like an internal fortress. So I leave you with one haunting inquiry to mull over until we meet again. If tomorrow you woke with zero fear, what one action would you take before sunset, and what excuse will seem laughable in hindsight? Sit with that. Let it tug at the edges of your comfort zone all night. I promised we would map the hidden geometry of courage. So let's begin by noticing that fear and bravery are not opposites, but mirror images folded along a single axis we can learn to bend. Imagine every fear as a two-dimensional shadow cast by a three-dimensional object. Its unnoticed depth is potential. When we rotate that object in the light of reason, the shadow shrinks, elongates, or disappears altogether. In other words, perception is the hinge that turns panic into power. Right now, your brain may be drafting horror movie storyboards about tomorrow's unknowns. Rotate the frame a few degrees and you suddenly see opportunities begging to be seized. The shape never changed, only the angle did. So the first secret of geometry is simple: adjust the angle, redraw the shadow. But how do we rotate perspective on command? We need coordinates. I use 4: time, magnitude, agency, and narrative. Give any fear a numeric value for each coordinate, and you convert dread into data. Time: how soon could it truly unfold? Magnitude: how catastrophic on a scale from cracked screen to meteor strike? Agency: how much influence can you exert? Narrative: which story does your mind attach? Write the numbers, and the shapeless beast crystallizes into a graph you can plot on paper. Low time, low magnitude fears become background noise. High magnitude, high agency fears become call to adventure quests. The moment we plot the points, we stop hallucinating monsters and start planning missions. I tested this live when I challenged 2 strangers to cross a glass bridge suspended over an alligator pool for $1 million. Cameras rolled, hearts pounded, and every survival circuit screamed retreat. But we paused filming and asked them to plot the coordinates. Time was immediate, magnitude high. Agency: turns out the bridge was engineered to hold 8 tons. The apparent risk was theatrical. Narrative: I could die was replaced by I could become a legend. Their fear morphed into kinetic energy. They sprinted. When they reached the other side, one contestant confessed, "It felt like walking through my own limiting belief." That is geometry rendered in flesh. Super deep question: which of your fears would shrink instantly if you audited the true agency you possess? Maybe the job market feels brutal until you realize you can gain a new skill this week. Maybe climate anxiety gnaws at you until you notice how local activism scales into policy change. Agency is often hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to notice the switchboard. Let's push further. Every courageous act decomposes into micro moves measurable by seconds. Neuroscientists call it the 5-second window, the gap between impulse and avoidance. Commit to a move, hit publish, knock on the door before 5 seconds evaporate, and momentum carries you forward. Miss the window, and the prefrontal cortex lights up with rationalizations. Miss Bree's secret, most outrageous stunts begin with a 5-second countdown nobody sees on camera. We yell go, and the body obeys before the mind can draft excuses. You can deploy this at your kitchen table. Count backwards from 5, and on 0 act, send the email, sign up for the class, record the intro. Train like a sprinter leaving the blocks. Yet brute forcing action isn't enough. We must also rewrite the conceptual scenery. Philosophers from Kierkegaard to Camus remind us that anxiety erupts when we confront absolute freedom. We're dizzy at the cliff not because we'll fall, but because we could jump. Recognizing choice is terrifying. Exercising choice is liberating. I once asked a Tibetan monk what fear felt like after decades of practice. He smiled like wind against a mountain present, but it moves around me. His mountain wasn't stoic numbness, it was clarity about choice. He knew every gust contained alternative routes, each leading to different versions of himself. Which brings us to the principle of multiplicity. At any moment, countless futures branch outward. Fear picks the branch labeled immediate loss. Courage flips the signpost toward possible gain. Same tree, different leaf. Here's a practical exercise we can do together, the reversible risk test. List 3 actions you hesitate to take. For each, ask if this fails, can I recover the baseline within 1 year? If yes, the risk is reversible, courage demands pursuit. Then ask, if this succeeds, could it multiply life satisfaction tenfold? If yes, the upside dwarfs downside. Now the geometry becomes obvious. Reversible risks with asymmetric upside create acute angles in our graph launch points, where a small pivot leads to exponential altitude. Entrepreneurs exploit this daily. Philosophers call it living authentically. I call it common sense disguised as daring. But what about irreducible fears like death, illness, or betrayal? We approach them through another geometric lens, the circle of acceptance. Draw a circle and label its interior within my influence, the exterior beyond my influence. Death sits outside. Exercise and medical care sit inside. Betrayal by others sits outside. Choosing trustworthy allies sits inside. Whenever anxiety surges, locate the concern on your circle. If it's outside, shift energy from control to preparation, wills, insurance, ethical wills of wisdom. If it's inside, draft a playbook. This visualization halved my insomnia incidents during the first pandemic wave. Circles beat spirals. Let's zoom back to the body. Courage is somatic, not just cerebral. The vagus nerve links brain to gut, broadcasting alarms or approvals. You cannot think your way to calm if your physiology blares sirens. So we practice coherent breathing, 6 breaths per minute, equal inhale and exhale. Do it for 5 minutes before any high-stakes event. Heart rate variability rises, prefrontal cortex reclaims bandwidth, and suddenly the unknown feels like an improv partner, not a firing squad. Athletes, Navy divers, and yes, YouTubers jumping from helicopters all lean on this ancient hack. It costs nothing but attention, and it proves the architecture of bravery is built from oxygen and rhythm. Deep question break. If breath could speak, what lesson would it teach about the impermanence of your current worry? Contemplate the fact each inhale is borrowed oxygen, each exhale a tiny surrender. Fear imagines permanence, breathing demonstrates flow. When you exhale, are you not practicing micro goodbyes with every cell? We haven't discussed the social dimension yet. Fear is contagious, but so is valor. Surround yourself with pessimists, and your risk map skews dark crimson. Spend 1 week in a mastermind of builders, and the map glows emerald. I curate friend circles who treat bold experiments as casual Tuesday chats. Their baseline drags my ceiling upward. If your environment lacks such catalysts, engineer virtual proximity, podcasts, books, communities. Mirror neurons do not discriminate between physical and digital stimuli. They will copy whichever courage you feed them. Story interlude. During a 24-hour charity live stream, we attempted to raise $10 million for food banks. Midway, donation velocity flatlined. Anxiety gnawed, what if we fail publicly? Then we invited an 8-year-old viewer on screen to share how food banks saved his family. His sincerity reignited belief across 500,000 viewers. Donations spiked. Lesson: personal meaning resurrects collective bravery. Whenever you waver, anchor your act of courage to a face, a name, a cause bigger than your ego. Fear can bully an isolated individual. It falters against a mission. Let's tackle cognitive distortions, the tessellations of terror. Catastrophizing, black and white thinking, mind reading each is a repeating pattern that fills the mental wall like overzealous wallpaper. The antidote is pattern interrupt. Deploy humor, absurdity, or radical gratitude. I once diffused my pre-keynote meltdown by declaring into the mirror, "Behold the dancing existential jellyfish." Try staying petrified after that. Laughter fractures rigidity, allowing logic to seep through the cracks. Sometimes philosophy is a well-timed prank on your own nervous system. Another breakthrough came when I reframed fear as a subscription service. Each panic episode is a bill collecting attention in exchange for imaginary security. Canceling the subscription means refusal to pay with rumination. Whenever the mental invoice arrives, what if the project fails? I answer, service no longer needed. I invest attention elsewhere. You can, too. Redirect attention to sensory reality, the texture of fabric, the hum of traffic, the smell of citrus peel. Presence starves anxiety's business model. Super deep question: whose fear script are you reciting that isn't yours? Parents, teachers, social media, they rent space in your head, drilling secondhand caution into firsthand dreams. Trace a persistent fear back to its original narrator and ask whether their worldview serves your future. You may discover you've been acting out chapters written decades ago for someone else's plot. We've come far, but geometry includes topology, how spaces stretch without tearing. Your comfort zone is a topological shape. It can expand infinitely while remaining continuous. Each day you step slightly beyond its boundary, you attach a new loop, and yesterday's frontier becomes today's interior. No dramatics needed, just consistent stretch. The world grows familiar precisely where you once labeled it terrifying. Imagine your future self 6 months ahead, living comfortably inside zones that currently spike your pulse. That person is not a stranger. It is you plus accumulated increments of stretch. Before I release you to reflection, perform this experiment tonight. Replace your usual scrolling with a courage reel. Visualize tomorrow's scariest task frame by frame, you entering the room, feeling pulse, breathing steady, executing eloquently, exiting with shoulders relaxed. Neuroscience calls it mental rehearsal. Olympians swear by it. The brain stores imagined victories in similar neural circuits as real ones, preloading confidence. Sleep on that reel. Let synapses consolidate the movie overnight. Wake primed to match the internal preview. One last geometric mystery. Fear often masks desire. They occupy the same coordinates but differ in polarity. The terror of rejection is the desire for connection. The dread of failure is the desire for mastery. Start translating dread back into desire, and motivation flips from repel to attract. What if every quiver pointed to a hidden wish? Sit quietly and ask, what do I secretly hope will happen beyond this fear? Let the answer surface unedited. There lies your compass. I leave you with today's pivotal inquiry. If you guaranteed yourself 1 hour of untouchable courage tomorrow, where would you deploy it? And what ripple would that create by next year? Trace the ripple, feel its magnitude, believe its plausibility. Then remember that hour already belongs to you. Courage accrues interest when claimed.